Our event for the night. It is our community seminar titled "Do Vaccines Cause Autism?" First, I'd like to clarify that any opinions expressed by our panelists today do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any of the organizers. The Arab Initiative is a nonprofit organization that aims to reduce health disparities, highlight healthcare needs, and fight stigma within the Arab American community, with the goal of improving health outcomes for Arab Americans. As current and rising healthcare professionals, a large aspect of medicine involves listening to the patients and addressing their concerns. Therefore, through our seminars, our goal is to offer our community a platform for stigmatized discussions and to create a safe space for community members to comfortably voice their opinions and perspectives and engage in meaningful conversations and discussions around specific healthcare topics. Our co-sponsors and co-organizers for tonight are Blue Hands United, which is a nonprofit organization that aims to raise awareness and support families affected by autism. They have been participating in the worldwide campaign Light It Up Blue every April since 2014. Blue Hands has partnered with several organizations, schools, and community members to help spread awareness for autism. They offer free summer programs and festivals for children and young adults with special needs, as well as different programs throughout the year to help promote and support these families. As everyone's aware, today's event focuses on the topic of vaccinations and answering the questions, do vaccines cause autism? We are joined by a great group of panelists to facilitate this discussion. But before we get started, I'd like to address a couple of things. We are going Facebook Live for the whole event, but the camera is aimed at the panelists, so none of you, the audience members, will be showing. And second, we'd like to actually start off, before I introduce the panel, we have a couple of questions for you guys to answer, just so we and the panel know where our audience stands. You will need your phones for this, so go ahead and take out your phones. And we will need you to text AHI, AAHI, to 22333. And our first question will be, are you vaccinated? So go ahead and text A for yes or B for no.
Can you tell us the number text again, please?
Yeah, it's 22333.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you're having any problems, anyone wearing the AHI shirt should be able to help you. And just a reminder that all of your answers are anonymous, so you won't know whose names are. Wow, so 98% of you are vaccinated. Glad to have you here. We'll go on to our next question. Do you or would you vaccinate your children? A, if yes, on the regular schedule. B, if yes, but on a delayed schedule. C, if you give them some vaccines but not all. And D, if you will not.
You don't need to retext that number again. Just put the.
Yep, so you can just keep texting that same number. You don't have to. So just 2 or 3 more seconds. And let's end it. And the results show 72% of you would vaccinate on the regular schedule. And the other 2 most common answers were some vaccines and none at all. Okay, let's go on. So this is actually going, your answers are going to be showing up as a word cloud. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, the more you'll text an answer, the larger it'll show up on the screen, but every person can only text one answer. So let's see what you guys think. What is one word that comes to mind when you think of the term vaccines? So a lot of people seem to think they're preventative. All right, we'll take like 3 more seconds. And I think that looks pretty good. And we're going to do this again. But in one sentence, please state one argument you know or have heard from people who support vaccines. And with this, I'd like to ask you guys to please read what's on the projector and try to come up with something new, because all your answers will be showing up. So. Okay, we'll take about 5 more seconds. And let's go on to the next one. So now we're going to do the other viewpoint. In one sentence, please state one argument you know or have heard from people who are against vaccines. 5 more seconds. And let's go. All right, and now this question is again back to the A and B for yes and no. Do you believe children should be required to be immunized in order to attend public schools in Michigan? I'd like to remind the people that just came in that we do have some empty seats in the front if you want to move up. Okay, we'll take a couple more seconds. And let's see the next question. Well, let's see the results first. 61% want to see that being required, and 39% would not. Interesting. Let's move on. Okay, and for this question, what is your stance on vaccinations? A, if you're pro-vaccine, B, if you are anti-vaccine, and C, if you are unsure. And we will actually hold off on showing you guys the results for this question until the end. Okay, let's take 5 more seconds. And let's, so we're going to do this right now. And like I said, we'll show you guys the results at the end. So, thank you all for participating in this brief survey. The results will be shared with you at the end of the program. We do have our great panelists with us today. We're pleased to have you guys to engage in a discussion on vaccinations. Each one will be sharing their knowledge with us based on from their professional respective fields. We have with us Dr. Mohammed Hamid. He is a pediatrician as well as a public health advocate. Ms. Nadia Hamadi, a physician assistant with a focus on internal medicine. Dr. Rima Shara, one of our local pharmacists. Ms. Mona Alawiye, a parent advocate and an event moderator. And Dr. Alexis Sabah, who is a practicing pediatrician in our community. Before we start, we realize this could be a sensitive subject. We're grateful to offer this open platform and to hold this discussion, and we really hope that everyone shows the utmost professionalism and respect to everyone present in this room, regardless of your viewpoints. And with that, let's get started with our panelists sharing a little bit more about themselves and their professional perspective on this topic. So let's start with Dr. Hamid.
I'm not sure if you can.
Is it working? Good, okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. I'm very impressed to see such a good crowd on a Saturday, and it seems that this is a very passionate and important topic for our community. I'm glad to be part of the panel. I thank Ahi for the invitation, and I'm happy to be among my esteemed colleagues. In terms of background, as the intro said, my background is in pediatrics, but the past 10 years I have been the public health officer for Wayne County, and last year I moved to Trinity Health, where I am the Senior Vice President for Community Health and Wellbeing. So currently my job is to oversee in communities around 22 states in 95 communities across our nation. So this is quite a sensitive topic that we always talk about. But from a public health background, if we want to talk about the great accomplishments of public health, then we can literally state that it is vaccination, because all the science and all the data and all the statistics show that due to vaccinations, we were able to reduce and in some instances eradicate childhood diseases that are completely preventable, and those are life-threatening diseases. And the fabric or the survey that was administered at the beginning truly reflects what's happening outside of this room. So if we look at the percentage of people that are vaccinated in the United States, then it is close to 95. In this room, it's 98%. But if you look at the practice currently, then if we look at Wayne County and the state of Michigan, then we are between 72% to 73%, which reflects almost 30% of those that are wishy-washy or not on the vaccination schedule. You guys stated right, the vaccines are very important in terms of prevention. That was the biggest word in the survey that was given, as well as life-saving. That was the second biggest word. But some of you mentioned herd immunity, and this is very important to know, because although we encourage everybody to be vaccinated, we know that there are medical reasons for people that are either immunocompromised or they are vulnerable, that cannot benefit from the immunity or the immune response that the vaccine gives. And this is where herd immunity or herd protection, if you heard that term, comes into play. And that means that when we are able to eliminate or reduce the exposure of these diseases to those that are vulnerable, then we are protecting them as well. So it's kind of limiting the risk of what's happening. And we heard in the past several years, specifically the infamous measles case in Disneyland in California, or that case on the plane where an infant that had measles infected others. I think this is a perfect example of how herd immunity can be in danger, because when you are exposing others and you are not protected, then this is where we are spreading the disease. If we look at some numbers, and I didn't want to give you a lot of numbers, but just looking at the major three diseases that are probably relevant to our topic. So many of you know that autism, due to a study that was pulled and proved to be a fake study, was linked to MMR, which is measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. So if we look at those three diseases and we look at when the introduction of that vaccine, MMR, or vaccines that are protected against measles and rubella and mumps, then since that introduction we were able to reduce the prevalence of these diseases by 99.9% for measles, 97.4% for mumps, and 99.9% for rubella. But we were able to reduce all death cases from these diseases by 100%. So that is complete protection. However, we are seeing now an increase in the incidence. So if we look at in the 80s, we had almost 250,000 cases of measles. That dropped almost to less than 400 in 2013, but now in 2017 we have 775 cases in the United States. So we are on the upward, which doesn't give me, at least as a public health professional, a comfort feeling. The same applies for mumps. We were in 2000 at 43,000, now we're at 46,000. And for rubella, although we are not seeing an increase, but in 2000 we had almost 40,000 cases that were dropped to 2015 to 5 cases. So we would like not to see that increase. So I think this is where we are going to probably, the panel discussion is going to be evolving or concentrating around that. Just one last statistic, that if we see a 5% decline in vaccinating children for MMR, which is mumps, measles, and rubella, just 5%, that is going in the United States, that is going to increase the incident of diseases by threefold, and will put a burden on the health system, and specifically public health, in the sum of 1.2 million, only 5%. So I'm going to end on a note that brings us back to the question, do vaccines cause autism? Absolutely not. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohandan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As explained before, my name is Nadia Hinedi. I am a physician assistant in internal medicine, but more importantly, I am a mother, and that's why I'm here today, to voice my concerns over the issue with vaccine safety. Before I begin today, I would like to clarify that I believe doctors work passionately and diligently day in and day out to care for their patients. And I in no way, shape, or form intend to misconstrue their good intentions by the information I am about to present. And I'm also in no way, shape, or form saying that the CDC, NIH, HHS, HRSA, or other government officials are ill-intentioned, but rather that we have all become subject to a corrupt establishment. And lastly, I am not here to tell anybody not to vaccinate. For years, I contemplated the safety of vaccines. I dwelled deep into vaccine research while pregnant with my first child over 7 years ago. I began asking questions such as, what ingredients are in vaccines, and how long does vaccine immunity last anyway? As for the vaccine ingredient list, from metals such as aluminum tightly bound to chemical toxins and known carcinogens such as formaldehyde and polysorbate 80, to unethical and unheard of ingredients such as aborted fetal cells, monkey kidney cells, canine kidney cells, pig viruses, and the list goes on. For those of you who are skeptical, I do have the CDC's vaccine ingredient list along with me, along with citations of every study that I referenced today. And just when you thought that thimerosal was a thing of the past, while we were led to believe that thimerosal was removed from all vaccines, I urge all pediatricians to look closely at the back of the packaging, particularly of the ones that read thimerosal free. Because according to the CDC, the label thimerosal free refers to those vaccines that have approximately, or I should say less than or equal to 0.3 micrograms per dose. And this is post-production and quoted off the CDC website, meaning that it is not used as a preservative in most vaccines. However, it is used during the early stages of production and subsequently removed, leaving a clinically insignificant trace. Well, that clinically insignificant trace amounts to 600 parts per billion when calculated. What's 600 parts per billion, you ask? According to the EPA, 2 parts per billion is the safe limit in drinking water. And if a liquid has 200 parts per billion, that's considered a toxic hazard. One of the growth mediums used in vaccine manufacturing is the chick embryonic material, which can possibly be infected with Campylobacter jejuni. And according to the CDC, Campylobacter jejuni is one of the most common risk factors for Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. And worth the mention, GBS is listed on most vaccine package inserts as a reported adverse event. According to the Journal of the AMA, one of the theories behind the risk of GBS after flu vaccination is Campylobacter jejuni contamination from vaccines cultured in chicken embryonic material. Viral cells, which are also used in vaccine manufacturing. These are kidney cells from the African green monkey. They're immortalized cells, and they're also considered to be neoplastic or cancerous cells. They are almost always grown in bovine serum, which also runs the risk of contamination with certain viral species or prions. The CDC refers to prion diseases as quote-unquote transmissible spongiform encephalopathies that are a family of rare progressive neurodegenerative disorders that affect both humans and animals. Prion diseases are usually rapidly progressive and always fatal. My point is that as long as animals and animal products are used for vaccine manufacturing, the potential for infection and apparently cancer, amongst other things, will exist. In 2005, the FDA put out a statement about the contaminants in foreign DNA used in their vaccines, and they quoted, "We do not know if any of the ingredients found in vaccines which contain foreign DNA will lead to any event." To put this into perspective for you, a newborn baby born averaging about 7 pounds receives 16 times the FDA-determined safe limit of aluminum, which is 5 micrograms per kilogram per day. For those of you that try to fancy your beliefs and state that the amounts are so minuscule, you're not only misconceiving the notion of toxicity, but you're also misconceiving that aluminum is in nanoparticle form when injected. Injected, it is tightly bound to the antigen, bacteria, or virus, the polysorbate 80, the Triton X100, which is a Dow surfactant agent, by the way, the antibiotic, the formaldehyde, the aborted fetal tissue, the MSG, and the list goes on, and absorbed at a rate of 100%. The vaccine materials bound in this way are now capable of entry into the brain 20-fold. The antibiotic significantly diminishes the ability for metal detoxification from the body. The MSG is an excitotoxin, which can potentially lead to cell death and has been linked to birth defects, developmental delays, and infertility, as has polysorbate 80. Altogether now, they cross the blood-brain barrier, the gut barrier, and this mechanism results in an accumulation of these toxins in the brain and throughout the body as these substances are not excreted. This scenario, without a doubt, can lead to many disorders, including leaky brain and leaky gut. Leaky brain is a loose term for disorders characterizing brain inflammation and brain damage, such as encephalopathy, seizures, and other forms of neurological damage. So where does autism fit in? I'm sure that's the question you guys are all thinking. Well, contrary to conventional and popular belief that autism is a psychiatric disorder, in recent years, many studies indicate that children with autism spectrum disorder have ongoing brain inflammation or encephalitis in different regions of their brain, indicating that autism is a form of encephalopathy. According to the many parents of the hundreds of thousands affected by autism, autism is a term coined by the medical officials to divert blame away from the vaccines. To me, it's as clear as day, it's pure logic, and it's pure common sense with a touch of critical thinking. Combination vaccines have not been adequately studied. Less than 40 studies have been conducted on these vaccines, and as a matter of fact, there is not a single brand routinely injected into children between day 1 of age and 6 months of age that was licensed based on a clinical trial which included a placebo-controlled group. That should speak volumes. No studies look at the synergistic effects of the metals with each other, with antibiotics, with known carcinogens, with endocrine disruptors, and now add microorganisms to the mix. The CDC states, and I quote, "Exposures to mixed stressors can produce health consequences that are additive, synergistic, antagonistic, or can potentiate the response expected from individual component measures." How many of you here are familiar with the National Vaccine Injury Act of 1986? Which took away all liability from vaccine manufacturers. And as a result, taxpayers have burdened over $4 billion in vaccine injury payouts to the families of vaccine-injured children thus far. This law resulted in zero reason for quality control. After this law went into effect, they were free to recommend increasing the pediatric dose from 24 doses of 7 vaccines in the 1980s to 69 doses of 16 vaccines and counting. This lack of liability and removal of litigation further justifies their failed science, don't you think? If their studies were legitimate, unflawed, factual, and especially free, and I repeat, especially free from biased, fraudulent editorial censorship, then what would they have to hide from? What business is allowed to provide any type of service without liability? Even the Supreme Court, in the Brussowitz versus Wyatt case of 2011, ruled and classified vaccines as unavoidably unsafe products. We have to ask, with this dramatic escalation of vaccines in an effort to protect our children, answer me this: have our children gotten healthier? According to the CDC, 1 out of 6 children has a learning disability, 1 out of 9 has asthma, 1 out of 13 food allergies, 1 out of 50 autoimmune disease, 1 out of 400 type 1 diabetes, 1 out of 10 ADHD, and millions more with irritable bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis, epilepsy, and the list goes on. Autism is an epidemic, with a current rate of 1 in 36 children affected, projected to be 1 in 2 by the year 2032, some sources say by 2025. According to the AAHS, 56% of U.S. children are considered chronically ill. This emergence of illnesses coinciding with the tripling of the vaccine schedule deserves further attention and investigation. I can't seem to understand why the dots aren't being connected. This is by far the worst public health report card in our nation's history. Our children are the only hope for our future. We need their brains to work and we need their health intact. The truth is the truth. You can doubt it if you choose, however, it remains the truth. Thank you.
enlightening. Thank you very much. Well, as a pharmacist, I was wondering, what should I talk to you guys about? What's our roles as pharmacists in this community? Hearing what my colleagues have to say, we have two opposing views right here. Definitely, we have an issue at our hands, and we need to address it, okay? Definitely, she believes she's right, and definitely he believes he's right. Every one of us have made his opinion. But my problem is, what about your opinion? So I don't want to skew anybody's opinion. I think we need to put facts on the table. I'm not gonna look at this because I think there's something more important on how do we need to address this issue. She quoted a lot of, facts. But again, with a lot of these, with research, okay, I can quote a lot of facts that are opposite to hers. Right.
Depends on who's funding the study. CDC. You said it's a part, you asked us, right? So I'm getting involved because it matters. You said it matters what we think.
Would you like to sit in my place?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Thank you very much. So the idea, what I'm trying to say here is everybody has some part of the puzzle. As a pharmacist, I think my duty towards each and every one of my patients is to educate the patient. The patient has to be involved in their care. The problem we have our patients sit out there and tell them what to do. That does not work anymore. Because you know what? There's internet. I can Google anything and come up with answers. And depending on the sources I use, my answers could be right or it could be wrong. So I urge everybody here, I was supposed to tell you what is in these ingredients, but I don't think that's important, honestly. Because anybody can Google what thimerosal is, anybody can Google those. But the more important and present subject is how do we get together as a community and truly discuss this. And it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about how we're gonna save our kids. Andrew Wakefield did us all a great disservice. I wonder why even with the advent of people not vaccinating, autism is still on the rise. Is it truly vaccines causing diabetes or is it our health habits? So there's a lot going on. The picture is not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. There could be some things in vaccines that are not the greatest. Some additives in vaccines, but we cannot deny the fact that vaccines are important. Right before coming, I checked out, we have 159 cases of measles from January till February 2019. That is sad. Measles, the side effects that were quoted, they're rare. You know what? Acetaminophen, as a pharmacist, guess what? Causes liver damage. You stop taking it. So not every side effect that is mentioned is gonna happen. And nobody knows who it's gonna happen to. That's our pharmacology. Our pathophysiology is different. We react differently to things. But you guys have to be informed. And I think that's the key, is to be informed. We need more of these meetings. 5 minutes isn't gonna cut it. I have a lot, right? I'm not gonna bother with these. We need more. I urge every one of you to be active. Be your own advocate. Don't listen to what I'm gonna tell you or what she's gonna tell you or what he's gonna tell you. Do your homework with things. And you know what? We do it with everything. In Islam it says, وَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We're selective in what we apply that. I am Ahl al-Dhikr in pharmacy. He's a doctor. She's a PA. He's a physician. And she's an advocate. Every one of us has a part. So please, I urge you, do your homework and be active in your care. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for attending, and I really want to thank the panelists because you may think it's easy to get medical professionals to discuss vaccines, but it's not. And to have this set of panelists and diverse opinions here is truly an honor because we have seen firsthand, even putting this event together, how many medical professionals shut the door on even discussing vaccines. and as a parent, that's concerning. I am going to speak a little bit about myself from a personal perspective, and then kind of give you an idea of what I hear from parents as a parent advocate. My name is Imam Ali, and I'm a proud mother of a unique boy. I am a preschool teacher and the co-founder of Lions United for Autism. Prior to becoming a mother, I worked with the special education department in Dearborn schools. However, my passion to become an advocate grew after my son was born. During the first 5 years of his life, we faced many challenges. Amongst them was a developmental delay. Thankfully, after a lot of hard work and prayer, my son is currently thriving and is at age equivalence developmentally. But those first 5 years taught me a lot, and our fight is far from over, but we celebrate all of our small and not so small accomplishments. During those first 5 years, I found myself asking a lot of questions, becoming overprotective and maybe even a little too paranoid. But there was nothing that I wouldn't question, and vaccines came on that list. My son was given the MMR twice within a 4-month span. I was told this was by mistake. This is where the red flag went up for me, and I began questioning the medical system. Prior to this, I was going with the flow in regards to vaccines. I went to the appointments, he got them, I never questioned it. The next few years, I chose not to vaccinate my son. However, at age 5, I started to slowly catch him up, but I did so my way. I asked questions, I never did dual dosage, and I did them on my schedule. And thankfully at that age, we had changed pediatricians, and my son now has a very supportive pediatrician, Dr. Alex Saba, and he helped educate me. He always urged me to vaccinate, even when we didn't see eye to eye on every vaccine, but he did so by educating me. He wasn't aggressive, and that's what kind of got me to move towards catching my son up with vaccinations. So I'm here today to represent the mother who is scared. I'm here today to be a voice for the voiceless. Too often we hear pediatricians aggressively refusing to see patients who are not vaccinated. You'll start to see many pediatricians now are putting up signs on their doors saying, if you're not vaccinated, you're not welcome as a patient. Parents are going in, asking questions, they want to know the ingredients. Pediatricians are getting aggressive with them, and it's really turning parents away from even learning what is vaccinations all about. I'm here to remind us all that there are indeed two sides to this argument, and we cannot dismiss either one of them. My personal choice for my son was made based off of what I believe to be best for him and only him. My son is currently vaccinated and caught up for the most part. This doesn't mean that I can't understand the mom who is frightened or hesitant to give vaccines. However, I can also understand the pediatrician who sees the dire need to vaccinate every single one of his patients. They urge us to do this not because they don't care, but because they do. There is an undeniable epidemic. The number of individuals affected by autism and other disabilities is on the rise. To settle the question of why, we tend to look at possible causes such as vaccines, food, environment, and genetic factors. If there is anything I want everyone here on this panel to know and understand before we begin with questions and discussions, is that we all have one thing in common. We all want what is best for our child. I shared with you all a brief summary of who I am or what made me who I am today. I am not a medical professional, and I am here with more questions than answers. The one thing I need to emphasize is that I can only speak from my own personal experiences. I know that there are individuals, and many are probably here today, who have made the choice to not vaccinate based off their own personal research, data to support their belief. However, I am not one of them. I am representing the parent that made the choice based off fear and fear itself. I did not know the statistics when I decided to opt out of vaccines. I did not even know the names of the vaccines I opted out of. I chose to stay away from vaccines because I had a child before me who showed signs of delay, and I was scared. I didn't just stay away from vaccines. At the time, I heard if you have a high-protein diet, it affects brain development, so we limited protein. I heard dairy causes, it limits the growth of a child and the brain development, so we went on a non-dairy diet, we went on a gluten-free diet, we went vaccine-free, we did everything. So anything that was even a remote possibility or a contributing factor to my son's development, I eliminated. We will be giving the audience the opportunity to ask their questions and address their concerns. Many of you have data supporting vaccines possibly being the cause of other health issues, not just related to autism. You will have the opportunity to have your voice heard. However, my voice now is needed to urge all medical professionals to not shut the door on the parent who is scared. It is one thing to hear about autism, developmental delay, ADHD, or other learning disabilities. But once you have a child before you, slipping away slowly, you need answers, not aggression. You need a doctor who will hear you and guide you and understand you. What I want all medical professionals to understand is that this fear we cannot dismiss. We have to acknowledge the parents and answer their questions, and more importantly, we need to continue to work with ethics and morals, because I would like to believe that every medical professional went into medicine to help heal and not profit from illnesses.
Hello, my name is Alex Al-Sabah. I'm a pediatrician for the past 17 years. I do appreciate the invitation and highly appreciate it. Like I was saying, I am very, very passionate about this issue because I'm a father and obviously I'm a physician. I see a lot of parents that are very concerned about vaccine and what is the side effect. We have to look at the big picture about vaccine. Are we doing the right thing for our kids? First of all, I would like to explain to you what is the purpose of the vaccine. Vaccine is not because some parents are coming to me and tell me, oh, I don't want to inject my kid with a poison. A vaccine is not a poison. Vaccine is just a dead virus, or sometimes it's a live virus. We inject it to the human body just to prepare the body in case the body exposed to the real virus, so they'll be ready to fight it. So it's not a poison. How this autism and vaccine came apart is by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. I think he's a GI doctor in Britain that he was paid $500,000 to link autism with vaccine. He only established 12 patients. There was a very small group, and he falsified all the data. And a lot of people just believed his theory, and he gave us a scare. He came to the United States. He established an autism clinic in Texas. And with internet, with the website, you can Google and you can find a lot of false information. So I think he is to blame. Like I was saying, we have to look at the big picture about vaccine. Yes, like I was saying, we need to look at the big picture. There is smallpox killed around 500 million in the lifetime. So now we don't see smallpox anymore. Thank you for the vaccine. We don't see chickenpox anymore. We don't see polio anymore. It's because of the vaccine. Now I know we all worry about the side effects. The only serious side effect that you see is 1 in a million. So with Nadia, what you mentioned something about the side effect, encephalitis and seizures, those are severe side effects, which I agree with her, but it's how rare, it's extremely rare. I've been in practice for 17 years. I have not ever seen a child with severe side effect. The most common side effect I see in my practice is some swelling and some mild fever, and that's about it. I never ever seen a severe side effect. I know I did a research last year. I did a big presentation about autism and vaccine, and with all my research, I did not see any link between vaccine and autism. For sure, autism on the rise is because there must be genetic factors, there must be environmental factors, there must be something that is triggered autism, but it's not solely the vaccine. We just cannot just blame vaccine by itself. I think that's it. Yes. Sure.
So as far as what the doctor just said, the DSM criteria, the DSM-5 criteria, the reason before when autism was diagnosed, it was only severe cases. That's why it was like 1 in 10,000, okay? But the criteria changed, so it's no longer called autism, it's called autism spectrum disorder. So it's a huge spectrum now. That's why we see more. People are more aware of these things, so.
For the record, I have a patient that 4 years old. He had a tonsillectomy. He removed the tonsils, and he became autistic after the procedure. So that tells me it's not the vaccine. It's could be a stressful event that happened to the child. Could be a vaccine, could be a surgery, it could be a sickness, it could be anything. So it could be a genetic disorder that's hidden in this body, and it was waiting to show up. So I highly believe in vaccine. I highly recommend. I do appreciate the parents that are skeptical about vaccine. I totally understand. I have a friend who have an autistic child, and I sympathize with them. I'm a father, and I would probably do the same thing. But at the end of the day, I look at it as a medical profession. I look at it that I'm helping my kids, and I have so much passion for it. Thank you.
so much for sharing your perspectives. We appreciate you being here and blessing us with all this knowledge. Before we move on to today's Q&A session, since Mona is serving as the parent advocate and the event moderator, she has more questions than answers. And so I'm going to actually hand over the mic to her so she can get our Q&A session started. But I do want to point out that if you have any questions that you feel uncomfortable asking, since we are Facebook Live, feel free to go ahead and text them to that number that we used for the poll earlier, and they will show up on the screen and we can address them. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one general question that I wanted to ask the medical professionals, and it's a question that is always, I'm always approached with it. But before I ask the question, I kind of wanted us all to be in the shoes of these parents for a minute. I wanted to share a comment that I read on social media, and then I wanted to follow with a few of the testimonies from parents. A comment that I saw on social media went as follows. I started looking into vaccines last year, and in all honesty, I just stopped because I didn't understand half of what I was reading. The only thing I did understand was that the testimonies from parents who saw significant changes in their kids very shortly after being vaccinated, and logic only dictates that they must be related. I'm very on the fence when it comes to vaccines because I know at one point people were dropping left and right, and vaccines helped significantly. I just don't know why we are medicating perfectly healthy children against non-imminent threats. Now I'm going to read a few testimonies from parents, and I want us all to just reflect, because it's quick to say you must vaccinate, you shouldn't vaccinate. The parents that are connecting the dots between vaccines and what their child is going through, they're not doing it out of whim. Something happened to their child. Testimony, the first testimony. I trusted my doctor. I thought the science was settled. 2, I did not know that doctors only study vaccines briefly during medical school. 3, my daughter had her first seizure 3 hours after taking a vaccine at age 2, was perfectly healthy prior. 4, he had language. My son had language, and after vaccines, he lost his language and began to regress quickly. 5, I trusted the propaganda that said, don't ask questions. When you hear testimony after testimony from parents, how does the medical field explain the timing of events, the side effect of vaccines? We're all aware that majority of vaccines are given the first few years of life, but we're also aware that developmental delays show up at the same time. So is there potentially a correlation between the timing of vaccines and the diagnosis of autism? So my question to the medical professionals beside me, how do you explain to a parent who comes to you with a child who shows regression directly after or shortly after a vaccine?
I think it's because just coincident. I think the patient probably has some delay before the vaccine, and the vaccine it triggers these symptoms and start to show up. There's no correlation between vaccine and development delay. The problem that we are facing is because autism presents around 15 months of age, and this is when the time we give the vaccine. This is when we blame vaccine for the development delay or the autism. I have a patient that he started to have symptoms at now 9 months. This is before the MMR. So how can we blame MMR for autism when he didn't have the vaccine yet?
I'll just kind of bounce off of you, Dr. Alex. When it comes to how can we blame, let's say, the MMR, he didn't get it until 12 to 15 months, I'm assuming. The thing is, it's not just the MMR vaccine, and this is kind of what we've been led to believe. And to comment on something you said earlier about Dr. Andy Wakefield, it's unfortunate that he was just torn down the way that he was. He did not link autism to MMR. But his study was specifically about ileolymphoid dysplasia, which is a type of irritable bowel disease that he was finding very predominantly in the patients, and he wasn't even really studying the MMR, but he said in the patients getting the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine together, they had a higher incidence. He didn't say anything about autism other than by chance these children happen to be autistic. He said it should be investigated further. He did not make a link. But again, when it comes to the ileolymphoid dysplasia, all he was saying is that the incidence of any type of irritable bowel disease was much higher, and it wasn't just him that said that, and the people in any child that gets measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine together. And he recommended that parents get single dose vaccines. He said, get the measles shot separate from the mumps shot, separate from the rubella shot. And as soon as he said that, guess what? Every single dose vaccine was removed off the market. So there's a lot to this story other than what we hear on the national news, who, by the way, not only is our national news media bracketed, but they get 70 to 75% of their revenue from the pharmaceutical companies. So you need to think about that for a minute. What else was I going to bounce off? I forgot. Oh, okay. I'll talk more later.
I think one of the reasons these debates are, I try not to participate in these debates because you can tell the passion on both sides. And I don't think we're going to leave this room by changing anybody's mind. I'm sure not going to change Nadia's mind, or she's going to change mine. So, and I think these somehow are good debates, but they probably cause more harm than benefit, at least in my point, because many of the facts, or sometimes facts that are not really facts, are going to leave a stronger position for those of you who came here, pro or against. So I don't think we're going to change anybody's mind. But from probably trying to elaborate more on what has been said. So Nadia mentioned that there are a lot of conditions that our children are facing nowadays, which I agree. We have a lot of issues, not only our children, but overall our population is facing in terms of health and chronic diseases, and it reflects the lifestyle that we live, as well as the pollutants and the environment we are in and all that. So my question is, with all those conditions and risk factors, do we really want to add more diseases such as polio and smallpox and others that we know were eradicated, and we know that they do not? We didn't have actually a case of polio in quite some time. And if you want to add to what causes what, or if you want to link causalities, then let's look at now the cases of polio that are found in Syria in the past 7 years, and specifically in the areas when there was no government control. And by government control, that meant there was no public vaccination campaign. Since 1970, there was not a single case of polio, and now we have a whole region in Syria that is looking at polio. So one of the questions that says, if we do not give vaccines, what is the alternative? I'm not sure. Do you want your children to have smallpox and get natural immunity from smallpox? Go ahead, let's do that. Do you want them to experience polio? Then yes. So these are, I think, the things that we have to weigh when we start talking about things and studies and whether Andrew Wakefield is good or bad or what have you. There has been a history in the past almost quarter of a century that showed that yes, everything we do has a risk. The aspirin that you take has a risk, the life-saving medication. And when we talk about poison, well, what is the anti-poison for a snake poison? It's another poison. But if it saves your life, then hell yeah, I want to have that poison. So this is where we have to be on the balance between what is risky and what is even riskier. So if 98% of the population that are vaccinated their life is being saved by these vaccines, and we, as Alex said, the risk of the severe side effects are very minimal, then it is something that I'm willing to live with. And I gave it to my children, and I will still advocate as a public health officer or a public health official in my previous life, advocate for that, because as my duty as a public health officer, my duty is to protect the public. So if I see someone with tuberculosis, then I'm going to quarantine that person so that person would not give tuberculosis to anybody else. So anybody that is going to threaten the public safety of others by a personal choice, it is still your personal choice, and you're more than welcome to do that, but you cannot risk those around you that do not share the same point of view. And I think this is where the debate really gets into. It is, the anti-vaccine isn't something new. Anti-vaccine is something that started with the introduction of vaccines. And there is a whole article that I can tell you, it started in the 1800s till now. And it is always the same whether we don't want government to mandate things, and we don't want government to interfere with our lives, and we don't want something to be pushed down our throat. And I agree completely with you. But again, let's weigh the risks and let's weigh the benefits. If we have laws that protect people from drunk driving so they do not kill others, then we should have laws that protect people that are endangering the risk of others because they decide they don't want to be immune.
I'm sorry, but we actually, right, sorry. We actually are going to limit to one response per panelist just for the sake of time, so we can get more questions from our audience. Thank you. Dr. Sharna, do you have anything to add?
Actually, going back to the mother, okay, so definitely the mother has a concern because that was your question. How would we respond about the mother, okay? Definitely we cannot dismiss the concern of the mother. As a pharmacist, my main concern would be I'd like to know what is her question. You know, what is it that she's concerned about? The vaccine causing? Where did she get her information? I will try to make sure that I educate her and address every issue she has. I'm sure, you know, you said that the stuff happened, you know, the autism happened right after the vaccine. But then, could it be something else? I mean, what do we have? Why is it that we're gonna blame it on just the vaccine? There are other issues that could have, it could be genetic, and there's a lot of things you can go to, but the most important thing is not to dismiss a concern. Because if you dismiss a concern, you're belittling the person. And if they didn't trust you, they wouldn't be there asking you as their professional.
Thank you all for your contributions. We'll start with the audience questions, and then as we go on, we'll take some questions from here. I know someone has their hand up in the back. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Fuad Before. I listen I deal with GI surgery mainly. And every now and then I have a patient coming with colon cancer. Good evening, everyone. So every now and then I have someone coming with colon cancer and I advise them to have surgery to seek treatment. And they say, oh, they were going to seek homeopathic or herbs or other alternatives. And a month or a few months later or a year, they come with stage 4 cancer. So this is someone who could have been cured, and they go and because they hear things, they go and wait. This rarely happens, but it really breaks my heart to see that. I took vaccines, my kids took vaccines. Everything you do in life, there is a risk, I can assure you. Putting your kids next to you in the car is more risky than giving your kids vaccines. There is a risk. It is a calculated risk. When I take the flu vaccine every year, I have to sign a form telling me that I can get some demyelinating brain disease, okay? But I can save, so I feel so much better, and I get the flu much less than if I don't take the vaccine. Some people choose not to, but it's up to them. But I can assure you, it is much more risky not to take the vaccine. Look at Dr. Sabah mentioned something about polio. I was going to mention that the chickenpox, many diseases were eradicated because of the vaccine. So don't put your kids at higher risk by not giving them the vaccine.
I have a few questions. According to the Dean of the Muslims, it's would Allah want you to inject your children with pig and aborted fetus cells? Okay. The measles last 1 to 2 weeks. The treatment is just to stay home, basically. My parents and all of their friends had the measles, and the death rate was 0.02%. So it's not a deadly thing in general. It's not that bad. When I was young, all of my friends had the chickenpox. No one in my school or the surrounding schools passed away from that. When you get the measles or the chickenpox, you have a lifelong lasting immunity. Most vaccines only last up to 10 years. Not only is it autism, but it's peanut allergies, eczema, like she said, leaky gut, and cancer is the second leading cause of children's death these days. And I do believe that it does.
Can we just get to the question part so we
Okay.
can take more?
So with the,
Excuse me, hold on. Can she finish her statement? Because he made a statement in the back. Let her finish. She has five.
There's over 60 people in attendance today, so we would like
Standard,
to
and
hear
the
as
value
many
and
people's
everything.
opinions
That's
as possible. Thank
She
you.
was making a statement as he did.
Don't
She
give
can't
one person
continue.
the platform and somebody else not the platform.
That's all right, yes.
in medical school, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that they study about 2 pages of vaccines, and it's basically the CDC schedule, and how the things were eradicated after that. The CDC owns the patents on all of the vaccines, so they make money off of all of that. Unvaccinated children do not carry live viruses. Normally when a child is vaccinated, they're vaccinated with live viruses that shed and, in my opinion, cause outbreaks. And polio has not really been eradicated, it's been renamed.
Okay, so I think in order to make sure that everyone's actually asking questions rather than making statements, we're going to limit our questions off of that screen to give everyone a fair chance to ask their questions and get their questions answered by medical professionals. Thank you. I'm sorry?
What's the government doing to clean up those vaccines? To provide clean vaccines without all the additives, which is probably nothing. So if the vaccines were clean,
Okay, we're going to have our first.
So as far as the thimerosal, okay, because that's the preservative. So the preservative was used because of multiviral dosing. So anytime you have multiviral dosing, you run the chance when you inject, okay, for you to contaminate. So that's why thimerosal was used. So now in a lot of them, they're doing them single unit dosing. So the government is doing something. And again, even at the chance that we don't have any solid evidence saying that, still they're taking, they're taking the initiative to do something. What's your other question?
no, just because I'm hearing there's a fetus in there.
Well, again, the fetus. Okay, I have to interject on that. On the fetus one, it was just in the rubella, and that was back in the 60s.
No, that's not
Okay.
true. That's not
And
true.
the streamline, yes, it is.
It's on the CDC. Have you got
I will read it to you. I will read it to you. So usually, how do they make vaccines? I think I should have. So how do they do vaccines usually? Okay. So first thing, you have to find to create the adjuvant. Okay. So that's the first thing you do. And the way you do that basically is you have to create it from a virus. Okay, from an existing virus, an attenuated virus. Okay. So we have different kind of vaccines. We have the live inactivated. So we have the live, attenuated vaccines, we have the conjugated vaccines, and we have the inactive vaccines. So the MMR happened to be part of the live attenuated vaccines. So attenuated vaccines are vaccines that are weakened. So basically what we do is we try to mimic the immune system. Okay, so all we're doing basically, we're taking this vaccine that is active, and then we take a small chunk of it, a very small dose of it. Okay, and then we have to put it in a cell. And this cell usually, it's chick embryos. Depending if it's a viral or a bacterial, it differs. For the MMR, I'm going to be speaking towards the MMR. Okay, for the MMR, it's a chick embryo. And then we have to find a medium where it grows in it. So the medium, when you put the virus in the cell, okay, you have to put it in a medium for that cell to grow. After that, and then you add your, stabilizers, whatever you want to add in there, whatever they add in there for the MMR. So that's the first step. And then the second step, you have to get your adjuvant out. And then the third step, you have to purify it. And the last step is when you add your stabilizers. So it's really a cumbersome process. It's not a simple process to have a vaccine. Now, so I know you had said something about the fetus. fetal bovine serum. That's basically the medium that is used. So that's basically nutrient for growth, okay? And then the chick embryo is the chick embryo, and then you have sorbitol and hydrolyzed gelatin for stabilizers. I mean, if you wanna pick on everything you do in these things, I mean, there is something called istihala, okay, which is a change of state. So a lot of these, there's a change in state, so they have to purify, even when they put the virus in this medium, they have to take it out of this medium. So really, you're not getting the pig inside of you.
That's not true. You can't take it out. Once it's homogenized, how can you take it out? You didn't mention the process of homogenization.
There's something called chemical changes with things, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't know the full process of it, okay? But there's something called a chemical change. There's changes.
Yes.
There might be a trace of it, a very minor
which is
trace of it, but it's not the pig.
Well, that's
Okay,
a
it's the cell
contradiction
line,
what you just said.
it's the germ line, okay, it's the cell line.
You just said two different things.
No, I
Yes,
didn't.
you said there's no traces, then you said there might be the trace.
So
there's
they
a false
have to
statement
list-
being made.
Okay, so four ingredients. They have to list everything, the entire process, whatever they use through the entire process, they have to list it as ingredients. That's why they have the active and the inactive ingredients.
Yes.
Just real quick, I just wanted to, in order to continue the question and answer part, let's make sure, because if everyone shouts out something, then the panelists are not going to hear the question. And we want to be able to give opportunity to be fair for all the panelists to answer the one question, so you can see the different point of views, to answer the single question that's being asked. And the best way to control that is there is someone in the audience with the microphone, so if you raise your hand, they will come to you, and that should be the individual that speaks. And then to give the opportunity for the panelists to answer, that's the best way to encourage a dialogue, because we do want to get to all of your questions. The panelists all want to answer the questions, so that way it can just flow a little easier.
Thank you, Mona. We're going to give the mic now to Dr. Salban, if he can answer the question. I think the next question is going to be going to you, and that was off the screen. What do you suggest people who oppose vaccinations do in order to protect people from rising diseases such as measles, polio, and rubella? Yeah, so if they don't want to vaccinate, what else, how do you suggest that they would get the immunity? And I think both you and Nadia could answer this, each from your own perspective.
Well, from a clinical perspective, I do recommend the vaccine, and I would even up to that if they want to take the risk of not getting vaccinated. I do sometimes, actually all the time, I give them handout about the vaccine and what are the benefit versus the risk of the vaccine. So I'm going to leave it up to them as far as they're taking their chance.
So what do you recommend to immunocompromised children who cannot get vaccinated? How would they protect themselves from
immunocompromised?
Yeah, like immunocompromised patients. So the question to you is anyone who's immunocompromised, and the question to Nadia is anyone who just doesn't want to get vaccinated, how do they protect themselves and people around them?
I mean, if they're immunocompromised, they have to be, they have to be in an area that non-infectious. They have to be in a healthy environment.
Okay, so to further elaborate on that and to touch up a little bit on what you were saying, I think there's a little bit of misinformation when it comes to the overall, let's say, the efficacy of vaccines, because as I mentioned earlier too, in terms of how long titers last, there's a lot of back and forth about this, but there's a lot of studies to show that, as the audience member pointed out, she said up to 10 years. A lot of evidence shows between 2 and 10 years, sometimes even less than a year, especially in the cases of the acellular pertussis vaccine. But for example, just to be a little bit clear on the history of things, as Dr. Mohammed was mentioning, according to the Pediatrics Official Journal of the AAP, they basically attributed the synchronous drop in all diseases from the 1700s to the 1900s to public health measures of sanitation, hygiene practices, filtration, refrigeration, etc. Thus, they quoted in the journal, thus vaccination does not account for the impressive declines in mortality seen in the first half of the century. Furthermore, according to the World Health Statistics Annual between 1973 and 76, they quoted there has been a steady decline of infectious diseases in most developed countries, regardless of the percentage of immunizations administered in these countries. And you have to remember too, how about the non-vaccinatable diseases? How about the scarlet fever, the typhoid, the typhus? Why isn't anybody talking about that and how those just disappeared? All of this does, if you look at the history books from the Office of National Statistics and the statistics they report, you will see clearly that these diseases had already declined. And I have graphs here to show that they were almost bottomed out before the introduction of vaccines. So I'm not saying that the vaccines don't pose any type of efficacy, but my argument is that they're short-lived. So to me personally, when it comes to my children, I'm going to outweigh, and I'll get to that, answer the question, I'm going to outweigh what the risks versus the benefits are. So what do I do with my children? And we have to make sure wholesome, adequate nutrition, good water, good sanitation and hygiene practices, sunshine, exercise. Those will defeat any type of conventional practice any day. And this is how we've gotten to where we are today. Were people vaccinated prior to the 1800s? No. How did we make it this far? Sanitation has come a long way. In the 1800s, people, they had no filtration whatsoever. Human feces, human fecal matter, along with animal fecal matter, was dumped into the street and then afterwards dumped into their main water supply. People had, there was no cleanliness, no sanitation. This is what, I think it needs to be made clear in terms of the stance on vaccines that could they help? Sure, but I'm outweighing the risks is my point here, and you do have to understand a little bit about the history. Before making that ultimate conclusion that vaccines basically, eradicated all these diseases. And I think that answers your question.
Vitamins and good sanitation, they're going to have with the chickenpox.
Yes, so for example, the chickenpox, the one other thing.
The chickenpox, can you prevent the chickenpox from getting to your brain, getting the lungs?
It's a terrain.
You don't want to prevent it. Why would you prevent it?
Yeah. Would you,
So the
would you
chickenpox-
prevent meningitis?
Like, how do you prevent meningitis in such prevention?
How? Tell me
Okay.
how, so I can tell my patients.
Okay, so let me just, answer off of that. So when it comes to chickenpox and measles, and you guys are physicians and you know this, these are trivial illnesses. There's a big tactic with fear mongering that goes on when it comes to these diseases. How many of you here have had the chickenpox? I have, and guess what? It was right after my varicella vaccine. Every
Yeah,
single
but
one of my
this
siblings
is a
got it.
side effect of the vaccine. It
Sure.
is not the real chickenpox. We have to
It's
make
a
big
it's a
difference.
vaccine virus strain, and this is where the issue of retroviruses comes up.
Have you seen a chickenpox disease after the vaccine?
So
Never.
exactly, and I'm not telling you that there isn't any efficacy to it.
Of course.
So again, and to answer your question, what would I do in the case of chickenpox is you need, for example, the measles is highly responsive to vitamin A. If you give enough vitamin
This is
A,
only not in practice. This is only in the book. If you give vitamin A to everybody, do you eradicate measles? Of course not.
again, it goes back to the concept of wholesome nutrition, adequate fluids.
Have you seen meningitis in practice?
I haven't
Have you
seen
seen meningococcemia?
I haven't seen that,
Have
but I
you
do
seen
know
that?
that I
Have
do
you
know
seen-
that meningitis is listed on every single package insert for
Have you seen
vaccines as a
epiglottitis?
reported adverse event.
Have you seen epiglottitis?
I have.
You have?
I have.
Most likely it was unvaccinated child. And this is a
Well, I
deadly
know.
disease.
See, that's the problem. It was actually during my emergency room rotation. And unfortunately, we were not trained to ask when was your last vaccine.
Well, I have a patient that he came from overseas and he didn't have the hep vaccine and he had epiglottitis. Thank God we gave him a shot of antibiotics. Had I looked at the Rocephin antibiotics, the side effect of the medication, then I would probably not give him, then he will be dead. So there is no medication with this. I have a patient that she has amoxicillin. We give it like candy in this community. And I have Steven Johnson syndrome. Have you heard of Steven Johnson syndrome?
Absolutely. It's listed as an adverse event
It
as
happened
well as a
after
package.
amoxicillin. It didn't
And it
happen after the
could.
MMR.
It could though, but exactly, and I agree with you, and it's not just one thing, and I'm not saying it's all vaccines.
Everybody is blaming vaccine in this.
No, and I think that's where, again, there's other, Stevens-Johnson syndrome is very commonly happens after antibiotics, and not just amoxicillin. But I think there's a wide array of things that can possibly cause these, and I'm not putting blame 100% on vaccines, but I do
But all
believe
your
they play a
studies,
role.
all your data is I get the vaccine. If you look, this you have a.
Yeah, well, my point, you're not understanding what I just said. I'm saying that it's not all necessarily from vaccines. It could be from conventional medications as well.
So let's just limit it to the answer of the original question, just to open up the floor for more questions. Okay.
We have one right here. We have one right here.
First, I think Dr. Muhammad actually wanted to answer the prevention to treatment.
I think it was covered.
Covered. Okay.
Those that are either immunocompromised or unvaccinated really have to be very careful. Almost in any exposure. So daycare, exposure to those that are sick, exposure to other infants and all that. It has to be very much a concern because they are vulnerable. They're just like a clean slate that they cannot fight any common exposure that other people can fight. So that's where a lot. I agree, healthy lifestyle, nutrition and sanitation, a lot of sunshine, but I don't think that is going to prevent meningitis and other things, but certainly.
I just want to add one thing real quick. So for everything, for all diseases, lifestyle, we all know that, for lifestyle is the key thing to everything. So it's going to apply to everything. If you have a healthy lifestyle, definitely it's like a domino effect. It's going to help, but it is not the cure.
First of all, I have a comment. It's funny how the forum is called "Do Vaccines Cause Autism?" and we're really not discussing autism right now. We're discussing efficacy and safety of vaccines. And I think next time we have this discussion, that's what it should be called. Just a side note. I just wanted to touch on something Dr. Rima said, and she was talking about informing the parents and the patients, whoever is getting vaccines, informing them of risks to the vaccines. And this is a question for whoever wants to answer the question. Do you give informed consent to your patients, number one? And number two, if the adverse reaction is 1 in a million to the vaccine, and let's say your patient gets that adverse reaction, are you willing to take responsibility for it? Because the vaccine manufacturers, according to the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, the vaccine manufacturers aren't taking responsibility. So are the providers willing to take responsibility for what happens to their patients?
Yes, in a heartbeat. I will take responsibility.
So you'll sign a form?
So he's going to answer the question right now.
But he's signing a form, because when us mothers go to the doctor and try to refuse a vaccine like hepatitis B when my newborn was born, I was breastfeeding, already immune to it. My doctors made me sign a form saying that I would be responsible if my child got hepatitis B. Now, if I asked the doctor to sign that form saying if my child got an adverse reaction, would he take the liability?
No way.
He wouldn't.
Okay, so let's actually ask the doctor.
Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
I will take responsibility, yes. If you ask me, I will take responsibility.
Informed consent. No.
Yes, I do, yes.
The question was, do you give the patient informed consent when... Yes, I'll answer.
So every medical procedure, whatever it is, whether you go for a tooth filling or examination, whatever it is, there is a consent form. But however, the state of Michigan, when it comes to vaccines, they have certain logistics that are in effect for every pediatrician as well as for a public health department. So from the public health department, I'm going to tell you the experience we have. One thing that we discussed earlier on is every child has to have a complete vaccination record or a vaccine card in order to be enrolled in school. If not, then they need to go back and have an exemption from the health department or from their pediatrician. When they are vaccinated, there is a consent form. If they refuse the vaccine, then there is, as the lady in the back said, there is a form that they have to fill and ask and state why. So there are 3 exemptions. One is personal belief, one is religious practices or religious beliefs, and the third is a medical exemption. And the medical exemption is if vaccine is a contraindication. Because of the low vaccine rates that Michigan was encountering, the state of Michigan, the Department of Health and Human Services, the AAHS, came up with a mandate that those that are requesting an exemption from the vaccine based on personal belief, that is not a medical condition, nor or even I think also in the case of religious belief, they have to attend an educational session to go through the pros and cons of vaccines and what are the risks and what are the benefits, and then after that educational session, if they still decide they do not want to vaccine their children, they will be granted the waiver. And those were the things that we were doing at the health department. However, the ironic thing that we discovered when this law was in effect, that many of the waivers were out of convenience. So it's the last day of school, the school asks you for this paper, you don't have time to sit at your doctor's office or at the health department, wait for the vaccine, so you go and ask for a waiver. Many of the moms at the health department that we told them you have to sit for a 1-hour educational series said, no, just give them the vaccine, I'm in a hurry. So I'm not saying everybody has that attitude, but when that state legislation was passed 3 years ago, we saw at least 10% increase in the vaccination rate because parents were using the waiver as an excuse because they were busy. So this is where, again, the information, the sharing, the awareness and all that is something that has to be very much on the table and asked. So does everybody sign a consent form? Absolutely yes.
And just if you don't mind, 10 seconds literally to answer your question, because I don't think your question was answered about what's being done in terms of these vaccine ingredients. Well, according to the Informed Consent Action Network in a child health defense lawsuit, the AAHS, which is the Human Health and Services Department, confessed that it has not once complied. And by the way, the AAHS is basically the defendant in these vaccine injury cases. But it confessed that it has not once complied in over 30 years with statutory requirements for regular review of childhood vaccine safety, nor reported to Congress on measures to improve safety. And this is based on Public Health Service Act 42 U.S.C. To answer your question.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question. Sorry, she had her hand up. Got it. We'll take you next.
I don't need
my question is this, so there's one idea that, autism is an epidemic and on the rise, every decade, increase more and more. And then there's the other side of the story where it's not really on the rise, but the spectrum's just been stretched so much, and we're paying so much more attention, and this is why we think it's on the rise, but it really isn't. So what do you guys think? Anybody?
True. The DSM criteria,
Your remark is right. It is true. So the DSM-5 criteria changed. So before it used to be just severe cases that were noticed. Now it's a spectrum of disorders. So it encompasses a lot more than before. So that's why. Now, it could be on the rise based on the numbers we have from past, but your statement is correct. We know more about it now, basically.
So let's simplify it. Let's take obesity and overweight. So if the BMI currently anything over 25 is considered overweight, right? And that is the BMI. If by the next 2 years we became very aggressive and said, oh no, we're going to lower it down to 22, then everybody that is above 22 is now going to be considered overweight. Does that mean that it's on the rise? That means we are now changing the criteria. And when autism was something that has been there, but now it is discovered at a higher rate because it is more defined. It is now categorized into all these different spectrum disorders. There are so many different subcategories under this big autism. And we as professionals are more advanced in diagnosing that. And it's not only autism, it's ADHD. 20 years ago, nobody knew ADHD. Well, that child that cannot concentrate, well, he's a child, what do you expect? Now everybody is labeled as has a touch of ADHD or full ADHD and all that. It is part of the science process of how things are progressing. When people were dying at 50 years of age, 100 years ago, nobody would say they died because it is the lateral carotid artery that was blocked. They died because khalas amrun, it's the end of their life. But now we are advancing and we are finding a cause for everything. But does that mean that people weren't dying before because of heart disease? Absolutely they were, but we didn't know what they were dying.
Can I just... I have a question for the doctors, just really quick, because this is about autism. My question is, do you deny that autism is a form of brain inflammation, is a form of neural inflammation? Do you deny that? Do you still believe that, as Dr. Rima keeps saying, DSM-4, DSM-5? Because again, I think we need to kind of merge past that old school mentality of it's something psychiatric, because I can give you even history details as to who first termed it in 1943, a guy named Leo Kanner, but we're not going to go there.
Yes, I can deny there's no inflammation with kids with autism. Well, I can get you another study contrary to the study. Yes.
A non-industry funded study.
Okay, we have another question.
Oh yeah. Actually, there's 2 questions. The first one, what will happen if we delay the vaccine until 2 years old, since all symptoms come from 1 to 2? And the second question is, what will happen if we divided the doses for the vaccines? Thank you.
Can we divide them? No.
I mean, the reason we give the vaccine that early is because the kids are at high risk of early stage. For example, why we give the hepatitis B at birth? Because 95% if a newborn gets hepatitis B, it's 95% deadly. I mean, we can easily give it at 2 months and 4 months. So that's why we give it early. The older you get, the stronger immune system is, the less susceptible to diseases. The reason we give it early is because kids less than 2 years are the more prone to get infectious diseases.
But can they divide the MMR individually as
No.
opposed to just one dosage?
No.
I'm sorry.
Can they divide MMR into the individual?
You can divide MMR. Yes, you can divide MMR.
No, you can't. It's against the law. You can't.
I'm going to respond to you as well. If you heard in my speech, what I recommend for every parent to do is do your own research. You trust your pediatrician. You go by what they say, but they are not always right. And you as a parent, you need to know going in, okay, do I want my child to get 3 vaccines in 1 appointment? Do I want him to just take 1 now? I'll come back in a couple months. I believe as a parent, you should have that choice. And so you can do that research and you decide, because pediatricians, correct me if I'm mistaken, but in med school, they are taught basically the order of vaccines, how to take them, when to take them. There's no flexibility, if I'm not mistaken. So you as a parent need to come in and say, okay, how do I give my son this vaccine? That's my
So who is the expert in this? Again, if a parent, even with all due respect, okay, we all have our field of expertise. I want to go back to something that Nadia said earlier about Andrew Wakefield. And he's the one who said, you know what? How about we divide the vaccines? But what Nadia failed to say was Wakefield himself had filed a patent, okay, for a single antigen vaccines, measles, in 1997, okay, and he had financial interests, okay. Now, if you delay the vaccines, there is some form of immunity that the child gets from the mother, okay. Hepatitis B, correct me if I'm wrong, is not one of the immunities that is passed. So there's it's not one of the immunities that's passed from the mother. So that's why it is essential to be given that early on. Measles, if a child ends up with measles, it's true somebody mentioned earlier, you could have it when we had measles when we were kids, or chickenpox, what difference does it make? You get sick, you could die from it. So the risk of dying from measles is higher from the risk of you having the vaccine.
That's false. That's a false statement.
But the experts have the facts.
Don't state false
Someone with
statements.
the title
when
has
there's
the
no-
facts.
Yeah, that's false.
And you brought up like a financial interest by Dr. Andy Wakefield. I'm not going to talk about Andy Wakefield, but according to the Human Health and Services Department, our HHS, 97% of all of these employees, including CDC, pharmaceutical companies, and the FDA, 97% of them have a conflict of interest. So if you're going to quote somebody with a conflict of interest, you need to look at the ones who are actually making the vaccine, promoting the vaccine, licensing the vaccine, and then selling and standing to profit from the vaccine. The VRBAC committee within the FDA, 3 out of 5 of their committee members have tons of patents on the vaccines, and that's actually how the rotavirus got approved by Dr. Paul Offit. So,
our initial question was about, just so we have we respect our audience and answer their questions, the initial question was about what about a delayed schedule and why is it necessary to give the child the vaccine in the beginning? I think they touched on the history so far, so let's just answer their questions and get some more questions from the audience as well. Thank you. Do you have any comments to answer the question about the delayed vaccine schedule?
no, I mean, I personally, for those who choose to vaccinate, I would definitely opt for delayed vaccination.
Okay, and I think Dr. Okay, so we have a public health advocate actually who had a question as well.
Hello, my name is Laura. I work at Mott's Children's Hospital. I just got my MPH in epidemiology at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So some of you might be familiar with what happened in Minnesota in the last few years. There was an increase in measles in the Somali refugee community, whom Wakefield visited a few times in 2010 and 2011. Do you fear that our immigrant community will also be a target for anti-vaccination propaganda? Have you seen in your Arab American patients an increase in vaccine skepticism? Because when I read about the Somali community in Minnesota, I feel like I could easily replace Somali with Syrian or Yemeni.
That's a very interesting question. I think everybody is vulnerable for the conspiracy theory and the risk factors, what Nadia mentioned, the fear-mongering tactics, which can go both ways. I agree. I hope not. I hope that, again, people are more informed and people are aware. And what Muna said, people should do their own research. I completely agree. But also be careful what research sources you are getting. The internet now is very dangerous because there are so many unreliable resources. If you can change, not to make this a political debate, but if you can change a whole election based on the internet, then you can also invent whatever facts about anything you want in life. So I don't think the internet or your own research is going to replace your doctor. And I think just the idea of debating whether medical students get enough science about vaccines in there or how many pages is I wanted to tell you what I think about that idea. But you don't question your heart surgeon to go when you are under his knife, whether he studied the full book of surgery or he just focused on one artery. So let's not get there. But I think it is a dangerous thing when we trust untrusted sources in lieu of the trusted experts that have spent half of their lives studying and researching and doing this. Not to diminish all the facts that Nadia is bringing with her or the studies, but as Alex said, for one study there are 10 other studies, and it becomes then the debate of scientists. And if you want to get sucked into this, then it's going to turn your life into a very tough life in making every decision. When you start linking causes, no matter how remote, if you say, on my way to the museum, I had a car accident, therefore I will never go visit the museum, then this is the logic that we're using when we try to link things that do not make any sense.
Are you sure? Okay. How come we don't test immunity in our kids for vaccinations? So we know how many doses they actually need. If they have like 70% and a parent's okay with that, how come you can't test the immunity of your kids?
I don't know how I can answer this question. Can you hear me? Usually kids after birth, after 9 months, they're protected by their mother's immunity. And what's the point of checking immunity? Well, they did all the studies because some vaccines, it's win out with time. So So they did all the study, they put all the data. So with this research, you see if this vaccine for 1 year, they suggested to do another vaccine in the year from the first one.
Just so I could actually help with the answer, we do have titers, so when we start school, you have to get a titer. They draw your blood, and they say, I actually was not immune anymore to hepatitis B when I was 24, and I went through the 3 cycles again to get my immunity. So there is a way, if you're really in detail to check your immunity, you can. It's a simple blood
But
test.
if you are vaccinated for MMR, you already have immunity. Unless you don't trust medicine, it's a different story. Either you have to trust you.
There's some people that may not be immune. Not even just the boosters, their body rejects the vaccine.
It's not something we do all the time. It's not something we do all the time. Yes.
Okay, so this will actually be our last question, and we'll be wrapping up due to time constraints after this, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like for Nadia to just restate and re-clarify her sources, her facts that she stated, CDC and so on, all of the very same system that you guys, are embodied within and are representing. These are where her facts are coming from. So if you could just, can you restate that, please? Because I think there's a lack of clarification on the panel.
I feel like she referenced her sources as she was giving her speech.
Right, but we just had Dr. Hamami mention that her facts are unclear. You shouldn't, trust her facts and so on. And they're not credible sources. So if you can restate that.
So basically, and I think what we're trying to make clear, and even a little bit earlier, Dr. Alex, about the neuroinflammation, brain inflammation question, is everything I'm saying here is literally straight off the AAHS. Everything I'm saying here, and I agree, there could be studies that show the exact opposite, and this is where we're conflicted with this huge, corporation, if you may, or establishment that's very conflicted with financial interests. But to answer your question, ma'am. So basically, even from the AHS, and I had referenced the Informed Consent Action Network letters that went to the HHS and back, but I think it is worth mentioning when some of the audience members, one lady stood up and asked about the hepatitis B vaccine. For example, there is a study from the Stony Brook University Medical Center that found a 300% increased rate of autism among newborns receiving the hepatitis B at birth compared to those who did not get the vaccine at birth and perhaps got it later. There was another study along the same lines from Jackson University that found a 420% increase in autism in children vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So my question is, and I agree with the doctors, ask questions, do your research, look at credible sources, but my question is, why aren't we putting emphasis on the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated? Why does the government refuse to run this type of test? I actually have a test done by Mawson on this, and it shows a drastic difference in how much better and more improved the health of the unvaccinated are. So I know there's a lot of scare tactics going on, and I know this is each and every one of you, whether you vaccinate or not, knows what's best for your child, and I'm not here to judge that or sway that in any way. But I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Okay, so we're going to take an actual question. I just want to add something to you. The FDA also, this is cited on the FDA and the CDC. The adverse events are underrated. They are 0.0, 0.3. And if they are actually, parents don't even know that they can report to VIRS.com. If all the parents knew and they did report, they say that there would be a 300% inflation. My daughter just got vaccine injured 6 months ago. She's 11 and a half years old. My daughter has epilepsy. She had an adverse reaction to the aluminum adjuvant. And when I went to the doctors and I tested my daughter has normal genetic testing. There's no brain swelling. Her CTs, her MRIs. My daughter stopped breathing for 4.5 minutes. She's had 6 seizures. And nobody seems to know what's wrong with my daughter. They say there's nothing wrong with her. But I have to bring the research to my doctors. I find it very offensive for you guys to say that we're not the expertise, but we are the parents. We are advocating for our children. This is
We're going to take a question from the audience. We're going to take a question. I'm sorry. We will have time for comments later, but we really need to wrap up as there's like 5 minutes left. I think someone has a question in the back.
Hi, I'm a speech and language therapist, and so I'm kind of a part of what happens next when these kids get these diagnoses. And like Mona said, we have a lot of parents who say, my kid was perfectly fine, they had the shot, and now they don't speak, they don't make eye contact, they have seizures, so on and so forth. So my question for you is, for many of the panelists who are so sure to say that it's not a vaccine, as the therapist and as a doctor who actually can't diagnose it, it's either a developmental pediatrician or a neurologist, what do I say to those parents? Because I'm very uncomfortable saying that it's 100% not a vaccine. I do not want to discredit what they're saying. They know their child better than the doctor knows their child, and I don't feel comfortable saying, I just don't know. What is a very, I guess, general answer I can give to those parents? Because it is shown that it is neurological. And, you know, we can't, I understand there are patients who have cancer and they're older, we can kind of say it's a cancer cell, that's what happened to your body, but I think it's harder to explain that in a 1 to 2 year old. I see patients as young as 18 months. So I don't really know, I guess I'm looking for a way to kind of comfort these parents a little bit. I'm not a doctor, I can't, you know, diagnose them, but I can treat it.
And I don't think you should diagnose them. But let me ask you this question. How many of your patients that you are helping with are because of what you or the parents believe it's a consequence of the vaccine? What is the percentage?
Well, I have a large number of patients who have autism. I can't give you a number on how many people are saying they have autism because of the vaccine, but I do have a large number. I can't give you an exact number.
So a large number of autistic children that you are helping with, but how many of those, is it 80% that are post-vaccination? Is it 20? Is it 5?
I'd say it's less than 50, but I don't want to say it's a coincidence.
No, I'm not.
Well, that's what Dr. Sabah said, and that makes me very nervous. I don't ever want to tell a parent, it's just a coincidence that your kid got a vaccine and doesn't make eye contact with you and doesn't talk, because a lot of these kids were meeting developmental milestones, and then they just stopped.
So, unfortunately, there is nothing much you can say, not because there is something that you shouldn't tell. So, in other words, when we talk about psychiatric or psychological disorders, there are so many facts that are involved that you cannot say this happened because of this. So, some of my students are here. I teach a mental health course at U of M. And the first thing that we talk about initially at the first lecture is that when we talk about behavioral health, or we talk about mental health, or we talk about psychological or psychiatric disorders, there is not one single factor. You cannot only say it's only genetics. You cannot only say it's biological. You cannot only say it's environmental. There isn't, it's not like any other field of medicine that 1 + 1 = 2 that you can put a cost to it. So it might be coincidence, it might be genetics, it might be, as Alex said, a predisposing. We talk about predisposing factors and precipitating factors. It might be something that would have been there and it will show later on, but because of whatever stress, the vaccine or the process of vaccine or whatever happened after the vaccine happened, this happened. So this is why it would be very interesting to look at your population and start doing your own mini study of linking who is saying what happened after what. And let's establish a sequence of events. And then let's put science to it and let's try to see if there is true validity or not. So unfortunately, in your position or in my position or Alex or anybody in this room, if someone wants to come to me and say, why is my son or daughter experiencing this? Then I will give you exactly the theory that any scientific book is going to give you. We're not really sure. It's multifactorial. It might be genetic. It might be biological. It might be because of an event. It might be, there is a slim chance that it might be this speed. It might be 1% or 0.1% or 0.001%. But no one can give you a true cause for what is happening when it comes to these behavioral issues or behavioral health disorders. And it can, if we want even to expand it beyond that, we can apply it to some diseases that we still don't know what the mechanism is, and this is the nature of science. Science is not at 100% of being able to explore everything, and this is why it's a progressive field.
Thank you.
Just would like to say that you must trust your medical doctor or the medical profession. When patients ask me what is the cause of autism, like Dr. Imam would say, I would say the best answer, I tell them I don't know, because this is the most honest answer, but I can tell them it's probably genetics, probably there is environmental. It could be from vaccine. With the best answer, I just tell them I don't know. It could be anything.
So I think, and with all due respect, doctors, I mean, we're the #1 nation in the whole entire world. We have the smartest doctors, the smartest scientists, the best technology. Why aren't we making a connection? And I'm not going to sit there and blame it on one thing. That's not what I'm trying to say right now. But what I'm saying is we have the modalities to do so, but why aren't we doing it? And that's why there's another picture here that we need to address. And I want to ask you guys a question, and anybody please answer me with all honesty. When the NIH, when studies off of VARS tell you that 79.4% of all children who died of SIDS had received more than one vaccine that day, what's your response to that? What other things are causing this? What type of coincidence could be so grand to cause a 79.4% incidence of SIDS in children that got more than one vaccine that day?
It's not an infant death syndrome. Define it.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and end it with
Again, I mean, if you ask me about concern, again, we have to look at the big picture. We are looking at small details. Looking at the big picture, it's what are we doing with the vaccine? How many lives are we saving? If you want to look at the small details, you're not going to vaccinate. You're going to stay home and confine yourself to the house. You have to look at the big picture, how many diseases we eradicated. We don't see any disinfected disease anymore. I would rather have autistic child rather than have a child die.
That's an insult.
Would you have a son die of chickenpox?
Hey, you don't have an autistic child, so don't say that. You can never say.
Well, I can say whatever I want. I'm sorry.
See how weird. That's disrespectful, though. That's disrespectful for people that have autistic kids. Yeah, that is autistic because you don't have an autistic child, so you don't have that. You're not in the shoes of an autistic parent to say that. So that is disrespectful to the person that has an autistic child.
Can say what they want to say.
Okay, so I want
There's nothing here. There's nothing here.
Despite our viewpoints, let's all stay respectful
That's
towards
a
each
personal
other.
opinion that's disrespectful to an autistic.
Okay, it is a personal opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's not necessary to make a decision.
Exactly, that was a statement.
Have the same standards between those with the title and these people out here that are human beings as well. Have the same standards. Shame on you.
This is the last question. I would like to keep it respectful. Dr. Alex is my kid's pediatrician, and although we have differing opinions, I respect him. But I do have a question. After Nadia presented the 79.4% statistics rate for SIDS, he said, let's not focus on the small details, but on the bigger picture. If my child, God forbid, died of SIDS, let's not focus on my child dying of SIDS, for example, on that detail, but let's focus on the bigger picture. I would want my child to be, I would want answers, in other words. I wouldn't want my child to be set aside and say, let's focus on the bigger picture. Doesn't my child's life matter?
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Schroeder will respond to this question, and this will be the last thing.
I think every life matters. Each and every one of you does have a valid concern. And I think we said that early on. I wanted to make that clear initially. You do have a valid concern, but I think the problem sometimes is you have the right to put your emotions, but with emotions and judgment, sometimes the judgment is skewed. You want answers. I wish I have answers for you. But again, unless we have collectively, unless we work together collectively to bring about understanding, more understanding about the issues. If you want to go with studies, as much as anyone can pull studies, there are studies conflicting. Okay? Why don't we have randomized controlled trials? Because it's unethical with vaccines. You can't have randomized controlled trials. Again, I think let's make the best out of this gathering. And once you start with finger pointing and disrespecting, I guess we lose. Nobody wins. We're one community at the end of the day. If you have an autistic child, my heart breaks for that. I don't know if I will have one or not. Again, it's an issue that we have in our community and we're trying to resolve it. We're not trying to bicker. We're not trying to score points on each other. And I think if anybody came here and left today thinking we're scoring points, you missed the point. point? I mean, I'm not paid for this. None of us is paid for this. We're all doing it because we care about our community. So let's make a collective effort and try to help each other.
I really want to thank the panel for coming out here today. I'm sure it was not easy for any of you. Second, I really want to thank all of you for showing up. We were hoping that this would be a very educational debate for everyone, and we will have more on that from some of our co-founders. Unfortunately, what happened at the end. However, I want to thank you guys for staying respectful throughout the whole event and for coming in today with all your questions, and we hope that we have answered them for you. Before we end, I would like to hand off the microphone to our two co-founders, Marwa and Maryam Ayash. They are co-founders of AAHS, the Arab American Health Initiative, and they will end us with some concluding remarks. And Dr. Sabah, I know you're
Hi everyone, I want to thank you all for being here. You guys are the reason why we put this on, Arab American Health Initiative, and all of these wonderful volunteers we have here. The last thing we want to say is it's not a fight between parents, the community against our doctors. We brought this conversation so we could have a holistic conversation. I understand that we're going to get heated. I respect that, and I respect everyone here, but we also have to understand that we do have these health professionals to help us through this. And the conversation is going to start when we're respecting each other. And so I want everyone to know it's not about one side or the other. We're not on two different sides. We're here for the children, and we have to remember that. It's not about us and what we think, it's our children that we're here for. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Latifa. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maryam Ayash. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Michigan and the co-founder for the Arab American Health Initiative.
And I'm Marwa Ayash, third-year medical student at ULM and also co-founder of AAHS.
So just to reiterate, we're really very grateful for having our panelists today, all of them to present their viewpoints. We wanted to open up a platform for this discussion, and we really appreciate the viewpoints that they shared. I know this is a very tough and this could be a very sensitive topic, and we really appreciate you guys cooperating with us. I know it hasn't been an easy discussion. We're just grateful to be able to have the platform to do it. Before we conclude the event, we asked everyone a question earlier about where everyone stood regarding vaccinations. And I think it's only fair to ask that question again now that the panel discussion is completed. So we'd like you guys to fill out your form for one last time to answer that question one more time. We'll take a few seconds for that. Take a few more seconds. And this group is meant to be transparent, meant to show the outcomes of what these events have on the community itself. So we're going to share the results for the question that we asked the first time before we started the event. Number 7. And we had 56% supporting pro-vaccines, 22% were anti, and 21% were unsure. And we're going to move on to the post-event responses. 57% are pro, 30% anti, and the rest are still unsure. I don't have the statistical, I would want to say it's not statistically significant, but there's still obviously people who are unsure and people, still a mix of responses within our community overall.
So when we put this event out there in the public, the first question we got was a debate. Why are you guys doing a debate? We respect and understand that Blue Hands are taking a neutral stand today, so the views that I'm mentioning now represent the Arab American Health Initiative's views. We were clear for being a pro-vaccine group, and we released a disclaimer statement stating so. As healthcare professionals and rising healthcare professionals, however, we made a choice to not live within our own healthcare bubble. That's why we started this group in the first place, to connect with the community. We realized that there were many passionate people within our healthcare community and our Arab American health community in general who are strong pro-vaxxers. We have in fact received a lot of messages from those individuals, ranging from potential disrespect and bullying all the way up to respect and constructive criticism. Regardless of the nature of these comments, they basically emphasize one of two thoughts. Why are you using the term debate, or why are you allowing a platform for anti-vaxxers to voice their opinions? While we appreciate and understand these viewpoints, we stood by our title and the way we set up our event because we were more interested in the general community. A big example would be messages we received from parents within the community who shared their fears and worries. It was the families who were scared, anxious, unsure of the effects of vaccinations due to the experiences they had with their own children or people that they who we were targeting in today's event. So back to the 2 points of criticisms that we received. First, why did we use the term debate? Whether we feel strongly one way or another, or whether we like it or not, when a community represented two opposing viewpoints or two unique viewpoints, this automatically implies that the term community debate is applicable. And this was very evident today as well, showing us that there were people who had mixed and different opinions on vaccinations today, which is why we stood by the title of the event. From a standpoint of why did we open up a platform for anti-vaxxers as well, we stood by that setup because we ultimately did not want to have an audience of healthcare professionals or people who are strong pro-vaxxers come and attend this event. This was not about preaching to the choir why vaccinations maybe don't cause autism, or why theories or work like Wakefield's are maybe dangerous and scary. So in a sense, we believe that we succeeded today in recruiting a very diverse audience, and that's very evident by the poll responses that we received today. At the end of the day, the whole purpose behind our seminar series in the organization is to focus on the community and address stigmatized topics that are sensitive, less discussed within our community, within our Arab American community. Because of the nature of these topics, we realize what we're getting ourselves into, and we realize that we will not be pleasing everyone by doing what we are doing. The reality is, though, today's event is very unlikely to influence those who are very strong anti-vaxxers or those who are very strong pro-vaxxers. However, what we hope today achieved is that for those who are in the neutral zone or those who are on the fence, we were able to offer them a little more discussion, a little more conversation to help them make better decisions for their children.
So kind of like Mariam said, this was a touchy topic, but we still wanted to have the debate. So thank you everyone for being extremely professional. Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing I want to know too is, I realize Michigan allows, you can opt out of a vaccine. What is the opinion of the panel that we should maintain freedom of choice? There's certain states, you can't go to school unless that gets vaccinated. So is your opinion the Michigan stance that people still have freedom of choice? Or we should make these people vax? See, I think that's what the anti-vax people are worried about, is we're going to have it shoved down our throats. I'm in America. I want freedom of choice.
One sentence from what people think, choice no choice.
You can have a choice. I have a lot of patients that are not vaccinated and they're happy. Okay. But if they ask me my medical opinion, yes, we should vaccinate our kids. If you don't want, that's fine.
The question
I'm against
is
it.
maintain the choice.
Of course. God bless America.
Right.
I'm pro-choice as well. I believe that parents know their children best. It's always good to seek professional opinions, but in the end, it's a parent's choice.
Same thing. It's a basic human right, absolutely. Pro-choice.
I don't think in the past 2 hours anybody said that there is a army that is going to go and vaccinate everybody. It is still your choice. However, the caveat that I mentioned earlier on, when it is going to threaten other people from a public health point of view, then there are things that should be put in place. It is still not vaccinating everybody, but if those that are going to cause risk for other people, then there should be some measures, whether it is certain ways of schooling or whatever, but this is what the public health community looks at. It's all community, not only one. And that's what public health, it is not individual health, it's public health.
I can understand from your point of view because of your position what you do. But like I said, I'm still in America, I want to have my choice.
Oh, absolutely,
You know?
absolutely.
You cannot separate the freedom
that's
of choice from the freedom to accept the
Yeah.
consequences of that choice.
So your choice is not to get vaccinated. Similar to my choice is not to have a driver's license. But with that, then I shouldn't be driving. If it's my choice not to have a driver's license and the law says I need a driver's license, although I might be the best driver in the world, that's the law where we live in.
The law doesn't say here though that I have to vaccinate.
No.
In California.
But if you're not vaccinated, then your child, or a child that is not vaccinated cannot be enrolled in school. Or a child that is not vaccinated cannot be, it has to be isolated from other children. These are the laws that we have to respect. It is still your choice, but those are the consequences of your choice.
Just for the sake of time, let's wrap up, and then I don't know if the panelists may be around afterwards, so that maybe if people want to come up and ask questions, otherwise we'll finish wrapping up.
I just want to thank you. That's something I was going to do. I just want to thank the panelists for taking the time to be here with us today. I want to thank everyone for being here on